Hello, I'm Eric Corman, Communications Director at League of Education Voters, and the parent of a 6th grade son in the public school system who needs special education services. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to build a brighter future for every Washington student. Our website is educationvoters.org. We believe that education is a tool for justice. One of the systems that perpetrate racial injustice experienced by communities of color is our schools. We believe every child deserves an excellent public education that provides an equal opportunity for success. In order to achieve this, we must pursue radical change in our school systems for equity, justice, and liberation. We must build schools and systems that honor the humanity in every student. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 7 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's LEVinar features a listening session with voices from the African American community. What works for African American students works for all students. In the wake of lives lost in the African American community, League of Education Voters has committed to listen, learn from, and amplify voices of the African American community because they are at the center of the movement for racial justice. In this webinar, we have assembled a statewide panel of African American thought leaders, community leaders, business owners, and educators to share their perspectives and answer your questions. Our panelists include Debrena Jackson Gandy, national best-selling author of a 25-year business owner, keynote speaker, founder of Seattle's Elevate Empowerment Movement, and former college trustee; Dr. Thelma Jackson, owner of Foresight Consulting, former college trustee, former multi-term school board member and chair, and has served on task forces and advisory councils for 5 governors of the state of Washington. Dr. Timmie Foster, ABD, owner of Foster Enterprise, founder of 100 Leading Ladies of Color, and Program Supervisor Lead for College and Career Readiness at the Washington State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI. Jerrall Haynes, president of the Spokane Schools Board, and Rashad Norris, Director of Community Engagement at Highline College. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is a space for you to submit questions to us. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function or at info@educationvoters.org. All right, Debrena Jackson Gandy is a national best-selling author who wrote Sacred Pampering Principles and All the Joy You Can Stand, international transformational speaker, business consultant, trainer, national seminar leader, strategic marketing coach, and self-care consultant. Ms. Gandy has been featured in magazines and publications such as Oprah's O, Essence, Black Enterprise, Empowering Women, Women's Day, the Seattle Times, the New York Daily News, and the Atlanta Metro. In addition to being a popular guest on over 35 radio shows, she also guest hosts a radio show focusing on personal growth, spiritual development, and transformation. She has spoken for organizations and conferences nationally and internationally. She has appeared on TV on CNN, CNN Live, Good Day New York, Good Morning Texas, the Wisdom Channel, and numerous regional and local news stations. And she has shared the stage with greats such as Maya Angelou, Alice Walker, and Gladys Knight. Dr. Thelma Jackson is the owner of Foresight Consultants, bringing over 30 years of consulting experience in education change initiatives, restructuring and reform, equity and diversity, policymaking, school boardmanship, cultural competency, community mobilization, strategic planning, educational auditing, school improvement, systemic change, curriculum evaluation for bias and fairness, professional development, and educational transformation. Dr. Jackson served on task forces and advisory councils for 5 governors of the state of Washington, including the Governor's Council on Education Reform and Funding in 1991, which resulted in the state's education reform law. Dr. Jackson served on the Advisory Council for the implementation of House Bill 2722, the legislation dealing with closing the achievement gap for African American students in the state. Dr. Jackson has served in numerous leadership capacities over the years, such as president of the Washington State School Directors Association, For 20 years was a member and 5-time president of the North Thurston School Board, served as president of the Pacific Region of National School Boards Association, as chair of the State Advisory Council on Vocational Education, as chairperson of the Washington State Legislative Ethics Board, as chair of the Commission on African American Affairs, and as president of the Board of Trustees of the Evergreen State College, where she later taught as an adjunct faculty in urban education on the Tacoma campus. Dr. Jackson currently serves on the steering committee of the Black Education Strategy Roundtable. She was also a former board member at League of Education Voters. Dr. Timmie Foster serves as Program Supervisor Lead for College and Career Readiness at the Washington State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. She is a national recording conscious artist, educator, business owner, parent, coach, and community advocate. She encamps a master's degree in educational leadership and policy studies from the University of Washington, as well as a school principal administrator certification. Her organization, Foster Enterprise, focuses on community and youth partnerships and training. Her empowerment workshops and conscious music genre of effectively navigating educational and safety issues through the harsh world of politics and society has also made her an asset to the larger community of change leaders. Jerrall Haynes is board president of Spokane Public Schools. He previously served as co-legislative liaison for the board. Jerrall is a 2007 graduate of Summerville High School in South Carolina and served in the United States Air Force, holding the rank of Staff Sergeant, assigned to Fairchild Air Force Base. Jerrall currently operates a fitness gym and is a freshman football coach at East Valley High School. He is active in the local branch of the NAACP. Rashad Norris currently devotes his time as the Director of Community Engagement at Highline College, where he travels to elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, community centers, libraries, and youth educational conferences to speak with youth and young adults about the importance of reading, education, and the process available to them to attend a higher education institution. The Black and Brown Male Summit, Young Educated Ladies Leading Summit, and Senior Signing Day event are examples of programs he has created and led that support strategies that engage Black, Indigenous students of color. They have proven to be essential to student growth and to creating sustainable interpersonal relationships on the college campus and with the K-12 partnerships that have been created from the events. Welcome Debrena Jackson Gandy, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Foster, Jerrall Haynes, and Rashad Norris. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. Today, we're going to tackle a couple of questions before opening up to Q&A for you. The first question is, what is your personal take on what you're seeing, and also what are you hearing? What are you experiencing in and from your community about what is currently happening in the country? And then we're going to tackle, based on your experience, what works for successfully educating African American students? And I'm going to throw out the first question. What do you see and what's going on right now? Because this is a historic time right now. And I'd like to call on Dr. Jackson just because you have seen so much that I can't imagine starting anywhere else. Oh, you're on mute right now.
Thank you, Eric. That is a powerful question, and I've given it some thought, and I'll try to answer it as briefly as I can. But as I'm interacting with people in my community, as I'm talking to others around the state, I'm hearing about high anxiety, fear, anger, feelings of helplessness and despair, and the amount of frustration that is happening with our educational setup, the remote learning that is going on. There still is a great amount of, with a lack of awareness about the disparities and the inequities that exist for many families as remote learning takes hold in our educational system. There's a lot of confusion about what's going on and why. There's a lot of anxiousness and fear about the rise up of overt racism at every level. Overall, there just seems to be a lot of concern about surviving this political and economic onslaught that seems to be coming all at once. And with COVID-19 having been the instance that's yanked the scab off of what is happening in this country. And with the outrageous result of that, with us having surpassed over 200,000 deaths from it, we're just in a climate and an environment that no one has ever seen before. And for the Black community and Black parents and Black families trying to cope through it all, there's just a lot of trauma being experienced by everyone at every level. And that's what I'm constantly hearing. That's what I'm constantly trying to help people put into some degree of understanding, but so much of it, there's no understanding you can help them with. So coping skills, resilience is about all I can offer people, because from one day to the next, from morning to afternoon, the situation changes and you just can't keep tabs of all that's going on. But it's resulting in a traumatized community for our people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. That's great insight. I'd like to move to the other side of the state right now and look at what's going on in Spokane. And Jerrall, you are definitely plugged in your community in so many ways. What are you personally hearing? What is your take on what's going on right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Eric. And I agree wholeheartedly with Dr. Jackson and her comments just now. There are so many mixed emotions and feelings that so many people are experiencing right now. This is one of the very few times in history that I think, in my personal opinion, that the vast majority of our community members are all experiencing some form of heartache and struggle at the same time. On the other hand, we're also experiencing some awakening of certain community members that historically were not aware of, or that were not readily able or willing to listen and to try to understand the struggles and experiences of some of our most marginalized community members and populations, very specifically in the year 2020, our Black community members. And so whereas for a lot of people that feeling of helplessness is very real and very true and genuine, I can't help but feel it, at least in some way, shape, or form, a feeling of hopefulness also, right? And organizations like yours, the League of Education Voters, is, Ms. Gandy mentioned it earlier when we were connecting, the statement and the action steps that you all put out, and it's hopeful to see that happening, and then seeing people know and understand that times like this require much more than statements of support and symbolic gestures, that they require actionable steps and actionable items to be followed through with.
Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I'd like to now move to a statewide level. And I know Dr. Foster has been working at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction down in Olympia. And I'm sure that Dr. Foster has been hearing a lot from colleagues, a lot from community members. And Dr. Foster, I'd love to hear your take on what's going on and what your community is telling you.
Hi, thank you. I first of all want to thank everybody for having me, in LEV and Debrena Jackson Gandy for organizing. I also want to give the disclaimer that I am not speaking on behalf of the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. I come to you today in my hat on my lunchtime, sharing my personal experiences as an educator who also has the perceived privilege of being a supervisor lead inside of OSPI. So that's the first piece I want to get out. But to answer your question from a statewide level, I'm seeing really, I think what, as Jerrall has said, as well, it's really seeing colleagues and allies really wanting to do the systemic work that has taken over 400 plus years to build, and now will take that time to undo. I'm seeing OSPI really do internal work as well as external work, reaching out to external stakeholders in a way that they haven't before, at this intensity, with this level of capacity. I'm seeing differences in considering the systemic structures, including more community-based organizations. working alongside the state in more innovative partnerships. For instance, the All in Washington Now, which is a $8.8, almost $9 million legislative grant that is housed through OSPI and then transferred to Seattle Foundation in partnership with the Seahawks. So that's a glimpse of what I'm seeing, some desires to do better and to acknowledge the data that continues to plague students and families that represent Black communities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Foster. And Rashad Norris, you are definitely plugged into your community in Highline for sure. And you work with community on a daily basis. And I'd love to hear what you're hearing and what you think about what's happening now. Oop, I think we just lost him real quick, but while we're waiting for him to come back, we'll move over to Dabrina. Dabrina, what are you hearing? What do you think about what's happening right now?
My goodness, I was taking so many notes as Dr. Jackson and Dr. Foster were sharing. I think Rashad is having a hard time hearing you, Eric, so that's why I think he was trying to dial back in. I want to quickly just touch upon several things. One is, I'm thinking of the book, A Tale of Two Cities, and it starts out by saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And the impetus for even this topic and this listening forum today was the murder of George Floyd. And so the worst of times part of that is that after all of the African Americans that have been murdered by unarmed, innocent, that have been murdered by those in the name of safety and serving all, officers, for example, finally, on May 25th, 2020, the activation occurred at a whole new level. So it took that long, but it finally happened, yay. So the best of times, the worst of times. As I look at us not being able to gather in large groups, particularly African Americans, the church has been an oasis of connection and worship and spiritual rejuvenation. And it hits extra hard when we can't gather in that way. Even before we started the LEVinar rolling, you got to see how that connection and relationship happens. Just as we all got acquainted as we came on to the Zoom call. So amplify that times 30, 40, 50. That happened every Sunday in Black churches. And that was a mainstay and an anchor for your soul. And to not being able to gather corporately like that affects the spiritual fabric of our community, which is our most sustaining fabric. As someone who's not an educator, but who's been at the policy level, I have been watching how this education piece has been navigated, not only here in our state, but also talking to friends in other states. And I'm really shocked at almost the assumption that all parents are now working from home and can sit in front of a computer as their child does their remote learning. I mean, the assumption is that, oh, all parents are working from home. No, that's a percentage of our population that had a professional level job. There's others that make it happen in service industries where you need their hands and their feet and they have to report to a location and leave the home every day. So that's been really fascinating to just watch kind of that assumption. And then also in terms of the effect of this season on Black business, Black entrepreneurs has been incredibly devastating, especially those in retail, extra hard, and retail has been hit in general, but it's amplified sometimes in the African American community. So Black businesses, often who might not have access to learning about the grants early or the PPP or the different offers that might be out there. And then let's see what else. But I think, and then probably the last thing that's exacerbated everything is a president that lack of empathy and caring has become scarily obvious. So where the words of your national leader can help assuage you a little bit and calm you a little bit, it has had the exact opposite effect and has in many cases condoned overt racial violence without any kind of admonishment. So, you know, you add that kerosene to the fires, the metaphoric fires. But then it's also been a time of more connection for many, including, you know, me and my family. But it's like I said, it's a combination of all of that, and all of it is quite a jumble.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dabrina. Yeah, that's great insight. Rashad, are you able to hear us now?
Yes, I am.
Yay.
I don't know what's going on, so please, I apologize. And everything that was said, I agree with. So
I can't wait to hear what you've been hearing in the community around Highline, though, because I know on a daily basis you've been connecting with community members, and based on what you've been hearing, I'd also love to hear your personal take on things too.
Well, yeah. So the tech at Highline, any college right now is struggling right now just because of the pandemic, and that really has just slowed enrollment. So it's been tough, and just know that this work with Highline has been tough for me personally, just because being a Black man and having, you know, Black children and having a Black family, and just having to always have to discuss and to have conversations around what's going on. It's hard for me to go to work and then say I want to recruit some kids to go to college. So that's the first thing I got to be honest with, that it's been very difficult. And I can only imagine how difficult it's been for other Black serving individuals, or individuals who like to serve Black students in higher ed or in any college or education period. Something that I've been working with our young people and with the college, you know, we're trying to figure out, you know, how are we serving our students holistically? You know, you just can't say go to college no more. This is more so like, what are we really talking about? You know, so I've been holding circles with different high school students, different college students, especially college students and students of color. I say Black students, African-American students, and to historical and what that looks like, you know, in the reactionary period that we're in right now, when, you know, everybody's jumping on the EDI work. You know, even I find myself doing more EDI work, you know, that's the equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'm bothered by that because of what's been, the narrative has been shifted. We saw a Black man be brutally murdered by police. That has nothing to do with EDI. That is police brutality amongst our Black community. That's been going on for years. So whenever we try to change the narrative or shift the narrative, our young people get mixed up. They get lost in, why are we teaching you EDI when you want to discuss something that's going on in the Black community and police brutality? And you have to be able to be very aware that that conversation has to be had, and we have to be vulnerable enough to talk about that. And so when you go to these schools and you start to talk with these individuals, as I've been doing at these small circles, and it has nothing to do with the EDI. They want to talk about, man, what is going on in the community? How do I help my school be more, be more vulnerable and have in spaces where we can have these discussions, because this is how I feel when I'm in my community. And then I have to come to school and be something totally different. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how I have to come here and totally just take off the mask and put on a whole new mask and say that everything's okay and we just keep moving. And I've been in conversations at my own school where I had to channel my emotions to stopping meetings and say, hey, you know what, before we go on, let's give some few words about what's really happening in the communities, especially our Black communities, before we just keep moving on. Because we would get right back to the agenda and as if nothing was happening. So I would say what I'm hearing is everything that what everybody else said. All my family members on this phone call or on this Zoom, yes, I agree with everything that they're saying. So I just want to add something new to that and say that the thing that I know that these kids are looking forward to is consistency. How consistent are we with this message? Are you going to do it just for one time, or are you going to be more consistent about trying to implant this in your conversations, in your classrooms, in your hallways, wherever you have the opportunity to speak to our young people? How consistent are we going to be with making sure we keep this on the table and we keep it fluid in our conversations and we try to make change?
Yeah, great points. Thank you so much, Rashad. We're going to tackle the second question in just a moment, but I wanted to let you know that you can submit questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be getting to questions very soon after we're done with this next question for the panel, which is, based on your experience, what works for successfully educating African-American students? And we can start right here in Washington State. And once again, Dr. Jackson, I'd like to start with you because you have seen a lot.
I would say that the number one thing that would help Black students is adequate resources. And the climate we're currently in, remote learning with the online learning, there doesn't seem to be much acknowledgement about the disparities and the inequities when it comes to the digital divide. Like someone said earlier, it's an assumption that parents are home with students during this remote learning season that we're in. And that is, it can't be farther from the truth. When it comes to Black students and other disenfranchised students, how many don't have a computer at home? How many really don't have internet access or Wi-Fi? Can get the help they need when everything is online, the support that they need. And the awareness that's beginning to come about in the education community, realizing how culturally irrelevant everything has been. And students have an awakening also, and they're asking these questions. Why are they learning so much about their past and their history that no one's ever mentioned to them in their schools before? So what helps them learn best is a culturally relevant curriculum, culturally relevant instructional materials, culturally competent teachers and administrators that can help them get through this very challenging period of time. I am really concerned about the loss of learning. We shut down school in the spring of last school year, so we lost a third there. We already knew about the summer loss of learning time, so another 3 months. And now with school starting in a remote learning situation for the fall, we're looking at 9 months. And for many of our students, they were already behind. So I am really concerned about what it's going to take in order to help our students be successful as they move forward. The acknowledgement that some intense intervention is going to need to happen to make sure that when we come out of this, if we come out of it anytime soon, it cannot be business as usual. Even if the order was given that we could fully populate our schools in person Monday morning, they cannot return to what they left from. And so that's how they best learn. And I have a strong hunch that with a lot of the high quality homeschooling that's going on and the online learning that's going on, many of our children are going to rediscover their gifts, talents, and strengths, and realize that they can learn faster, can learn further, can learn more in-depthly, and realize just how much implicit bias has gone into the expectations for how they function in school. So if they just had the adequate resources that they need, and that comes in all kinds of packages, we will see African-American, Black students, Indigenous students, and other students of color, other students that's been disenfranchised and marginalized, stepping up to the plate and functioning very well. But again, the pandemic has exposed the weaknesses of the educational system and the inadequacies of it. Many of the teachers and administrators are discovering just how inadequate they had been. They can't teach what they don't know. And so the miseducation of our children must be, all of our children must be addressed. And we must get that educational system working for all children and not just some children. So when it's working for Black students, as you said earlier, Eric, it'll be working for all students.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop at that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. I agree. Let's go ahead and move to the other side of the state again. And Jerrall, in Spokane, you've been doing some really innovative things as part of the school board and being president there. Also, what in your expertise works for African-American students?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be honest. It's incredibly tough to follow Dr. Jackson because she continues to hit the nail on the head in every way, shape, and form. Some of the things that she listed just now are some of the things that we listed very specifically in our board resolution that we adopted earlier this year to address and to make sure that we're really changing the very foundation and the backbone of our historically racist educational institution. And that's a national one, right? That's not just Spokane, not just Washington. Nationally, we have major issues. Racism was built into the very foundation, and we have to be very, very intentional about embedding anti-racism into the foundation and the backbones so that we can truly make sure that we are providing excellence for everyone. So yeah, like Dr. Jackson said, establishing policies that require all employees, new and old, to engage in anti-racism and cultural responsiveness training on a continual basis, not just a one-time check the box, you're done with it. Make sure that there's follow-up trainings, follow-up conversations, feedback given, and ongoing growth and development there possible for each and every employee that comes in contact with our students. It's very important because, again, you know, the system is the problem, and that means that every single position that fills the system is a part of the problem also. So making sure all of our employees are able to engage in those trainings on a regular basis and have those discussions continually is important. Also, making sure that we implement structures to increase student voice and specifically collect input regarding issues related to race and race equity by our students is vitally important, and making sure that they feel safe and they feel safe and supported enough to do so and bring those concerns forward. Not just students, but staff also. That's often an issue for our minority staff members within our educational institutions as well. With that being said, making sure that we acknowledge and understand that representation matters. So being very, very intentional and strategic about diversifying our workforce and making sure that our students see themselves at every single level of our systems so that they know that they can see that happening for them, right? That lack of representation matters. And as you notice, Eric, when we got on the call, everybody was connecting and reestablishing their relationships, and in my case, building relationships. And that's so vitally important, and is that much easier and less of a boundary for our students to do that in our schools if they see people that look like them and that can understand and represent them at every level also. Making sure that that we advance equitable student-centered learning by providing cultural connections to curriculum, like Dr. Jackson said. Student agency, project-based learning is a big one. That's huge for me. And competency centered structures for grading, course completion, and advancement for our students. There's so many things that we can list and that we can have a discussion around, and that's just some of them for me. Social emotional learning is also important, but ultimately project-based learning and making sure that our students feel connected to our staff members is crazy important and has to come first, in my personal opinion. Like I said, I'm a relational based person. Most of us are. And if you, my own personal experience, if I felt like I could trust my teacher and that my teacher believed in me and they genuinely cared about me, I would go to the end of the earth to make sure I got an A in that class, no matter how difficult the class was. But on the other end, if I felt like that teacher didn't care about me or was out to get me, even to my own detriment, I could care less about completing coursework or truly trying to grow from that educational experience. So.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you so much, Jerrall. I appreciate that.
Eric, can I jump in and go next?
Yeah, please do.
Good.
Go for it.
So I want to emphasize the relational parts of what Jerrall talked about. Connection works at the beginning, connection. So what does that look like? So we got on this Zoom call, and I hadn't met Jerrall before or seen him before this broadcast, and his face showed up. The first person I said hello to was Jerrall. I acknowledged him and I asked, I want to say your name correctly. It has unique spelling. Is it Jerrall or Jerrall? It's Jerrall. Got it. So let me say his name right, because I'm being present. I'm paying attention. Connection, get the name right. Out of the gate, I was listening to a broadcast. So that means you greet. Okay. So instead of saying connection, what do we mean connection? Connect. Just a greeting. That is not happening between a lot of teachers and their students, even virtually. There's not even a greeting happening. The name isn't being said. The name is being said wrong. So I was on a Zoom call with my mentor, Dr. Maxine Mims, who along with Dr. Thelma Jackson is one of the godmothers of higher ed and education in the Washington state. And on the broadcast, she said, because she was an educator, she's 92 now, so you can imagine how many decades of human beings that she has seen graduate and been in front of teaching. And she said, learning is an invitation. So if Black kids, African-American kids aren't responding to the learning, we got to look at how the invitation is being presented. She also said a Black child can't learn unless the teacher loves him or her. Jerrall used the word care, love that too. And I added, and unless the student knows that the teacher loves him or her. Then Maxine went on to say, you have to love another enough to help them learn. And so a lot of our teachers are Caucasian white women, not a problem. But if you were socialized in these United States, you have to have done some serious intentional detox and anti-white supremacy work and loving Black skin work, like for real, for real, for real. Because there's nothing in your upbringing that's gonna have you from your core love an African-American child in these United States. So if that vibration of not really loving and embracing and caring doesn't emanate from that teacher, that Black child kind of sits back and disengages. So that love piece, crucial. Connection, I see you. I know how to say your name. I say your name. So even on the broadcast, are teachers greeting students, or are we just jumping right into the coursework? Back to the point Dr. Jackson made, the digital divide. I was talking to a friend of mine who's on the East Coast. She's working from home. Her husband's working from home. Their children are having to be schooled remotely from home, and she had to upgrade their Wi-Fi. So first of all, the presumption is they have Wi-Fi. Second of all, they have computers. Third of all, they have the money to upgrade the Wi-Fi so all of them can be on computers at the same time. And those are a bunch of assumptions. And I think of simple things, Eric, like because of the beautiful, fresh energy, especially of young Black boys, what if we gave the option of standing desks? I know we're doing remote right now, but we've had years of the traditional classroom model, you sit down. How about standing desks as an option? Half the class is standing desks. I bet the grades and the engagement would jump with especially Black boys by having the chance to have to be standing up and not be contained in a sitting posture. Maybe not for everyone, but simple thinking like that. What supports learning? All students are not the same. The last thing really quick I'll share is I remember when I was back in high school at Timberline High School in Lacey, Washington, and I was an AP biology student. And because I was the only advanced placement biology student in my whole high school, I had to sit in on a regular biology class. And the teacher was the sage from the stage. In those days, we had a chalkboard, and he would stand in front of the chalkboard and lecture and write stuff on a board. And by and large, the boys were very disengaged in the class in general, and then especially the brown and Black boys were disengaged, and especially those who were athletes. And I kept watching this as I'm sitting in the back of the room doing my self-study. And then I would also see when papers were handed out, tests were handed out, and you would see C, C-, D, especially for those athletes that happen to be Black and brown boys. And it was very painful for me to sit in the back of the room and see that happen week after week. So even though I'm studying for my own advanced placement exam, self-study, I went to the teacher, I said, could I have just one 40-minute session a week with this group of young men? And he's like, could I have a lab room where all the lab equipment stored, the Bunsen burners and the test tubes? He goes, sure. So I went in that closet with I had 6 young Black men, a piece of chalk and a chalkboard, and they were sitting on stools and on counters. It was a lab closet. And we were, the lesson was on the splitting of cells and the different stages that the cells went through. I was no educated teacher. I didn't have a teacher certification, but I did have a love for these young Black and brown men that I got for 40 minutes one time each week. I made the teaching relevant. I used an example because they were all in athletics. So I used the football and the seam on the football to show how the chromosomes split. And then I passed the football to show how the data from cell to cell is passed. And one of them caught the ball. You just got the DNA, so you can replicate. Relevant, love them. I didn't need all these resources. I had the heart, and I knew they could learn, and that the level they were operating at was below par. And all of their grades, with only one time, once a week in a lab closet, their grades all went up a letter grade. And so that was a powerful experience for me, because I saw the difference that could be made with just a little bit of time and not necessarily the resources, the Marva Collins approach. And that was enough for them to now learn where they hadn't been. So I just want to share that little story because there's a lot of nuggets in there about what works for African-American kids. And as you mentioned at the beginning, what works for African-American kids works for all kids. Thanks for letting me take a little extra time.
You betcha. Thank you so much, Dabrina. I'd like to go to Rashad and then Dr. Foster. Rashad, in your expertise, what works for educating African-American students?
Well, all of those things that were shared from family is good, and I agree with all of them. So I'm going to give you something else that I've been teaching my African-American children, my Black children, is around energy-based learning and how we as Blacks, we have energy. And because of this energy, you have to be able to channel this energy. Now, this energy comes from a substance in our body called melanin that many people don't want to talk about, but it's the biological chemical that's in our body that keeps us so engaged with one another. And it's the vibration that keeps us alive and wanting to be around one another. So when you put us in the classroom where there's only 1 or 2 of us in the classroom, there's no energy in that classroom. So we're already disconnected because I cannot feel anybody else in that classroom. There's nothing around me that gives me any type of wanting to be in that classroom. The walls are white, the pictures are white, my teacher's white, my classroom, my classmates are white. So what do? I put my earpods in because the vibrations that's coming from that music, it fulfills my energy that I needed in my body. So now I'm already disconnected. So what happens is when you start to look at your classroom, you can change your classroom up. You may want to put a little bit of music on where you can put some jazz on, or with some non-vocals and just put some beats on. And there's a lot of music stations out there that allow you to do that. You can put it on low. You can put it down where you can just hear a little bit. At least allow your students, your Black students, to hear something where they're connected to. Now that jazz can be a hip hop jazz. So they may know the lyrics, but obviously the words are not coming out. So what happens is we are so disconnected, or we're not talking to our children about their bodies and what's in their bodies. And me, I'm so intrigued when I meet with my young people and we start talking about the chemical makeup in their bodies, what they're eating, what they're listening to, what that looks like on the field, if they're either basketball court. All of that is all constitutes what's in their body, what's the chemical makeup in their body, because it's energy based. So we have to look at what are these teachers. Now, I'm gonna tell you this too, that energy can be shifted, and it can be shifted from tone. So you think about tone when you have some type of rhythm going on and then something just interjects and it just breaks up that tone. So if I'm just having a good day, and I feel like nothing's wrong with me, I got my head down, I'm paying attention, teacher comes on and knocks on the table. Put your head up. What are you doing? Are you tired? We don't sleep in this class. All that right there, that tone, it disrupts all the energy that's in my body. You didn't come in with a nice little it's on. Let me tell you this. It's like double Dutch. When you double Dutch, you just don't jump in. You don't jump in. You see the people getting ready for the double Dutch, and
Right.
those who have a double Dutch, you got to understand when you double Dutch, you sitting in there, you waiting for that rope to come in. You got to get a bounce. You got to get a rhythm. When you find that bounce, you jump in. It's the same way when you work with these students, when you work around Black and brown students. You got to be able to jump in. There's an ability to jump in. You just don't jump in. So I think it's the same way of how we connect with our young Black, brown students. You got to change the atmosphere. You got to bring some more energy in here. You got to make me feel welcome in here. When I do cohort models with these students, when I do that work, I bring my radio, I bring my speaker, I got my phone, I play a little bit of music. We sit down, it's almost like we sitting on the back porch and we having a good conversation. The beat's going, there's a rhythm of how things are being traded with the conversation. If we're talking about something else, I'll wait. I let that conversation go on until it's time to go to the next one. That's fine. But you know what? You're going to get this information too. And if I had to stop you, I'll stop you in a way, brother. You know what? We'll come back to that. Let me go ahead. And you start to invite everybody in the conversation. You invite everybody. If young brother Tyrone is sitting in the corner and you're trying to have a discussion with your classmates, as a coach, me coaching, I got to get all my players involved. If we about to go play in the game, everybody got to be on court. Because if I got to pull one of you out, I got to make sure my substitutes are playing too, because this is a larger game. So game of life, I got to look around the room. If I see little young brother Tyrone over there, oh, hold up. Brother Tyrone, come on, man. I need you in the game, baby. I need you in the game. I see you over there. And I know you're thinking, because I've seen you before. I seen when you interjected, you be a part of the team. And I see how powerful you are. So come on up over here, man. Let's get you in this conversation. There's ways, there's strategies. And I don't know if it's just a strategy, but those are just ways you can truly just practice on getting some rhythm and really engaging with what these Black and brown babies have in a system, which is this melanin. And that's a whole nother subject. And what happens when you start to understand the chemical makeup and you start to understand the chemical compound that's in our body that requires rhythm and energy, you understand how to not only respect, but communicate with us more, that's more efficient and effective.
Woo!
That's Rashad.
Energy-based learning. I just learned something new. I love it.
I'll put that down. They're going off in the chats, Rashad. They said, when are you releasing the book?
I know. I got it. I'm working on it. I am working on it. Appreciate
All right,
you.
Dr. Foster, what works in your expertise?
Two things really stand out for me, in addition to what my family's already said. One is the cultural awareness, responsiveness, acknowledgement, and true consideration of Black people and Black students. The second is really simple, but has become foreign: eliminating racist practices as a best way of supporting Black students. The first one, in terms of cultural awareness, responsiveness, acknowledgement, and true consideration, I think her sister Debrena Jackson Gandy said as well, money and resources are not the end-all be-all. Like access and opportunity are not the end-all be-all, but really like true consideration and true love, which has become a foreign concept in supporting Black students in our country, I think are just really the pinnacle of how to serve them. There's a reason why this particular era is the time of the allies, right? Our allies being really called to action, and the tipping point of George Floyd in our society, I think is a wave in an era that we haven't seen before. We see 50 plus states, 50 states, 18 plus countries, all supporting the Black Lives Matter also movement. I'm thinking about Black fatigue and Black unity being a part of that. These are concepts that, take notes. If you don't know them, look them up, research them. And then Black Lives Mattering from three pinnacle standpoints, right? The first standpoint of Black Lives Mattering is really just the concept and philosophical principle that a Black life has matter, right? The second of the three is the political and business structure. Black Lives Matter as an organization, as a business, and as politics. And then the third, Black Lives Matter as a foreign concept. It is foreign in this country. Yep. It is foreign in this region. It's foreign in this state that Black life matters. So really addressing those issues help to build the academic trajectory of our Black students. And then the second piece of just, again, eliminating those racist and discriminatory practices culturally, independently, systemically, implicitly, internally. Again, take notes if you don't know these terms. There are lots of research and information out there. But looking and acknowledging that the data that shows students who identify and or categorize as Black African American is really a true reflection of our racist, systemic culture in this country, in this state. Yeah. And so really, if you can take hold of that concept, that there is no such thing as Black students not being able to learn, Black students not being hard, Black educators not knowing how to work with Black students, not understanding the best strategies for working with Black students. The reality boils down to eliminating the racist, historically marginalized practices in our country, identifying the tool of love, which is a foreign concept, outweighing other resources within our world, right? Because we've had and have now many resources to overcome the barriers that have systemically marginalized our students. So I can go on, I'll leave it there. And I'll also add also the cultural acknowledgement piece. And then there's really some key practices, practical strategies and solutions. They're available to you online, they're available to you here, and beyond. So that's my contribution for now.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Dr. Foster. That is priceless. I'll just say that. And we've got about 8 minutes or so for questions. I wish we had more time. I'm going to send the log of all the questions to every panelist, so that way each of you will get to see what's been asked during this time. But I'm going to start with this question right here. And whoever wants to jump in, just go ahead and jump in. How do people of color amplify their voices and concerns at school board meetings and the like when the majority of the staff are white or not people of color?
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
When I was a trustee member at Highline College, we would have our monthly board meetings in the large room with the microphones and also the podium for people to have their 2 minutes to share with the board. So oftentimes African Americans are not aware that anybody can come and speak at a school board meeting, at a trustee meeting. They can come with a group of people and 5 people can yield their 2 minutes to one person so they can speak for 10 minutes instead of only a 2-minute soundbite. So a lot of folks are just not aware. Everybody gets their 2 minutes. You can't have a bias. You don't have to have a connection. Often a connection is what gets you talk time. So a lot of people just aren't aware that everybody has the equal opportunity, no fee, no signing up ahead of time. Walk in, put your name on the list. And during those 2 minutes of public comment, anybody can have the mic and those policymakers listen.
And let me add that I work with young people, and I've been blessed and been thankful enough to being called by other parents to have me come in and represent their young men when they get into school board. So I have a story to share with you. This is a beautiful story. I have a young man that was up in Issaquah School District area, and this young man he's a 5th grader. And he went through some trouble around some racial incidents that happened with his teacher sitting him down on the ground doing music because he didn't want to do a music course or music class. And he sat him down for a good 3 weeks. Every time there was music, the little boy sat in the corner somewhere where everybody else played the music. It was demoralizing to this young Black boy. So he went home and told his mom. His mom did some great research. When I say great research, I mean some research on the board, who was on the board, how long they've been on the board bylaws. Then she did research on the school. She had gotten the bylaws in the school, the racial like practices, discrimination practices, and what's been going on historically, what's been going on in that school district. And she looked up, the repercussions and things that have happened from these incidents. So she did a whole research. She came in, family, with a thick book about this thick of all of her notes that she had. When she sat down at that board, I kid you not, that board looked at her like she was armed and she was ready. And when they asked her opening statement took up a good 30 minutes because she had notes. She had everything ready to go. So when you ask me what can we do as a family and as a Black family to go in with these board meetings, come ready and armed. Do your research on what you about to want to present on, and be ready to have your paperwork, be ready to show documentation, be ready to show that, you know what, I've done my research on you. So before you even answer a question that you just kind of skate by, let me show you what you said on paper, and let's make sure that it reflects what you're doing now. And when she went in there and she showed the reflection of how, you know what, this is what you say you would do, this is not what happened to that teacher. I want what happened. I want that teacher to happen right here. What you said that will happen with an infraction. And this is beyond a fraction. This is something that's been habitual with this teacher. So that teacher got to go. So to answer that question, I would tell you us all to be prepared. We can't go in there angrily. This is not a reaction type of way when you go into these board meetings. You got to go in strategically. So you want to work with somebody that mom still works with me. I still work with this young man, and it's been a great partnership. And I use this story every time I go. There's more to the story, but I know we're short on time, but just a bit of it, of how prepared she was to go in there and advocate for her baby. So be ready to advocate for your baby.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I've got time for just one more question, and this is sort of a big picture one, and I'm going to combine a couple of them because we've gotten a few like this. How do we stop incrementalism and achieve structural change in pre-K through 20? And what can people who are not persons of color do as an ally or co-conspirator to help achieve this structural change?
Let me address that, Eric. We don't have time to really get into it. That's a loaded double question. But let me just say that my biggest hope is that the conversations we're now having aren't fleeting moments, and that it will be longer lasting, that people are willing to peel back the layers on some of these deep questions that are coming up, and really analyze what the system is, what it looks like in relation to what we need it to be and want it to be. And for people to begin to acknowledge where the problems are, stop being in denial about the limitations and the shortfalls of our education system. That is the first step. That is the first step. Until you can identify the problem and the extent of the problem, you can't just jump in, beginning to come up with solutions, which we normally do in education. But if we can just make this stay for a bit, and not chalk it up to another fleeting moment where we had everybody's attention and nothing happened, nothing changed. So the operative question that I ask systems as I'm working with them is, what are you willing to do differently? What are you willing to do differently to achieve an outcome for students? And most of the time, people are just talking and it's just rhetoric, and they aren't willing to change a thing. Till they are ready to do something differently. Policy-wise, you got to institutionalize it. People come and go. School boards, superintendents, administrators, principals, they come and go. But how do you institutionalize things for a school district or a college or a university so that it outlives an individual? And when we get past just thinking of it as a fleeting moment, checking off boxes, we got to stop that. And so that's a very deep set of questions embedded into one, but it takes a much longer time to address and answer than this time permits us right now.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Dr. Foster, Jerrall, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just really quick. Again, Dr. Jackson hit it on the head for sure. I think a big part of it is for members of our community to be ready for moments like this. It is very, very important for us to be able to strike while the iron is hot, but make sure that the decisions that we made are very well thought out, they're thoughtful, they're planned out, and things of that nature. So a lot of the changes specifically that we're experiencing in my own community are things that we worked on and thought through for the last 4 years. And so some of them may be new to a lot of other people. They're not new to some of us because these are things that we've thought about and we've waited for the right and opportune moment to be able to make these systemic changes, to Dr. Jackson's point, that will be around long after any of us are gone.
Absolutely. And then I would just add, I think, again, Dr. Jackson's key question of the century now for allies, what are you willing to do differently? And I've asked that question to colleagues as well as termed a little differently. What are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up your power, your privilege, your access, your glamour to really do systemic change? And then also thinking about the power of learning, allies. There are so many resources out here to learn. Go back and listen to everything we said. We're all talking about best practices, research-based strategies and solutions. These aren't just words. These are actual formulas that are out on the web, on the worldwide internet. You can Google from anything that we've said and find them to be research-based practices and strategies that you can learn as an ally to support a cultural systemic change, to give up something, to do something differently. The strategies are there at your fingertip. Thank you very much.
Oh, goodness. And then thank you, Dr. Jackson, Jerrall, Dabrina, Rashad, and Dr. Jackson. This was absolutely fantastic. And thanks to everyone who participated, submitted questions, gave comments in the chat. And if the question was not answered, I apologize for running out of time. I'm going to share the Q&A log and the chat log with all the panelists. And panelists, if someone would like to contact you, how can they do that?
We need to put our email in the chat.
Or I can do it in the follow-up email to all participants.
You can do that. You can do, email contact. Yep.
Okay, great. I will go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
All right. On October 8th, please join us for a statewide virtual reconvening around racial equity in education. First, we're going to hear from Dr. Benjamin Danielson, Director of Odessa Brown Children's Clinic in Seattle, addressing the role of equity, diversity, access, and inclusion in our public education system. We'll also hear from 2021 Washington State teacher Brown. And then we're going to break into small sessions and discuss the issue together. You can register by visiting our website, educationvoters.org, and clicking on events. I'll also send registration information in the follow-up email. Our next webinar is Wednesday, October 14th. We've assembled a follow-up panel of African-American thought leaders, community leaders, business owners, and educators, including Dr. Jackson Gandy again, Dr. Deborah Sullivan, and Dr. Marcus Pimpleton from the Yakima School District to share perspectives and answer your questions. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to me, Eric, A-R-I-K, at educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation with closed caption capability will be available on our website, educationvoters.org, and will be sent to you in the follow-up email, which should arrive in your inbox in about 24 hours. Feel free to share the recording with your friends and colleagues. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website, educationvoters.org. Thank you again for attending. Each one of us has the right to feel safe and valued. Together, we'll fight for a world in which true educational and economic equity exists. We look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Jerrall, Dabrina, Rashad, Dr. Foster, Dr. Jackson, again, thank you so much for your time, sharing your expertise, sharing your energy. It was absolutely priceless. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Y'all were amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Always good to see you.